Okay. Hello. How are you?
Good.
All right. So we will start out with your name and how long you've been working, how long you've been in formal leadership, and just maybe your current role as well.
Perfect. My name is Marissa Blevins. Current role is Director of Learning and Development at Williams, and I've been with Williams for about 6 years, a little bit over 6 years. Have been in my current role for a year and a half, and then have been in the professional world for about 18 years. And I would say overall leadership, probably about 15 of those years.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go through a few questions. Our first one is, how did you prepare yourself to take on a formal leadership position? And what skills did you look for to acquire the position you have now? Whether that's work experiences, technical training, education, what did that look like for you?
So interesting. I hired on my first professional role was with Target, and it was actually a leader in training role. So I immediately started off working side by side with another leader
Wow.
in an HR generalist type of role, learning how to lead a team of HR technicians. So not only was I cutting my teeth on leadership, but I was also cutting my teeth within HR because my degree is in hotel restaurant.
Oh, wow.
With minors in business and Spanish. My internship was in HR. So that was really, I only had one formal class and then my internship experience. And so I was learning a ton, which was great because what I did for my first role is I helped open a facility for Target. And so at the same time, I was also going through baseline training that everyone was going through as well with their leaders. So a really, really good experience. I think probably if I could go back and do it all over again, I absolutely would. I would say yes, gain this training, gain kind of the importance of culture, do it, with peers. And I would just say overall, really, really good experience. With that being said, I worked for about 6 years and then I actually went back and did my MBA. And so as part of that process, I did an emphasis in HR. So a couple of things there. I think it made me much more well-rounded. So I had that business minor, but this kind of really helped to bring it full circle. And then with the emphasis in HR, it was really just application, right? Kind of what I had done and taking a look at it through a different lens. And so I think all of those have helped to prepare. With that being said, it's kind of trial by fire, right? I mean, from a leadership perspective, I think you got to just really immerse yourself and do it. So I think to me, that's the best learning experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so going in a little bit further, you've been in the leadership world and formal leadership for a little bit now. So what would you say is your leadership philosophy?
Are you saying I'm old?
No, just a few years of leadership.
Yeah, I love this question. It's very broad.
Yeah.
I think it follows kind of my personal philosophy, and ironically, I got to share that earlier this week on a panel, and it really is that each day we should be one step closer to what we should be. And for me, it's about how can we be better, right? How do we push? How do we be better? And it's not about competition or competing or being the best, but it's really challenging ourselves to take that step forward and create greater and better things to include our own development. So, and I would expect that from the team. I like to call that my blockbuster mentality, right? So if we are standing still 1 year and we're performing at the exact same level that we are today, a year from today, then we're falling behind. So I think for me, it's raising your hand, embracing new possibilities, and just really challenging yourself to be better.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this a second ago, but how do you then align your team with your leadership philosophy and your vision and translate that vision into action and kind of motivating the team?
Yeah, I think it's important. Number one, open communication, right? I mean, everyone brings a little bit of a different perspective and a different style, right? So I think it's helping to meet them where they are, listening, being very open to their contributions. I think it's also continuing to challenge and build team unity, right? So I think, for instance, on our team, we've got 4 different kind of diverse functions. And it's a challenge at times, right? Because everyone's going in a different direction. We're running 1,000 miles a minute. We've got a ton of deliverables that we have to do. I think it's pulling the team back together. It's maintaining those open connections. It's listening. It's sharing. It's challenging. And then I think the baseline of that is trust, to be honest. I think you've got to have the trust there in order to create the safe space to have those conversations. And by doing that, I think you become better every day. So, I mean, and I think sometimes we do that well, sometimes we don't. But I think, as long as we're learning from it and having those, applying those learnings, I think that's the most important part.
Yep. Awesome. I love this question. What does a typical day look like for you?
Which is interesting because I was just having this conversation with our intern, Mary Grace. And I don't know if I have a typical day. Yeah. I mean, we kind of go through seasons, I think, depending on what our deliverables are. I think certainly a lot of meetings, but I view my job as potentially connections, right? Making sure that we're connecting all of our employees to the bigger picture. We're connecting leaders to each other to make sure that they're having the appropriate conversations and sharing as needed. So certainly I participate in a lot of meetings. But the other thing I love about my role is that it does touch kind of some unique areas, right? So I've got, dealing with diversity and inclusion and working with EOT on what the strategy is and, doing follow-up items associated with that of how we execute through the organization, providing any support from a content review to internship meetings to, lots of stuff within the employee development space, and then our annual cycles that happen across the organization with performance and competencies and talent assessments, and then certainly a lot on our enterprise technical and compliance learning, having to work with another department on pulling together content to drive safety within the organization. So, it's a lot of interacting with employees. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of guiding and directing. And I have days where I don't build in enough time to self-reflect or spend time on me, which makes me not as good of a leader, right? So I'm trying to be a little bit more mindful about that. But what I would say is there's no typical day. I think we go in seasons and cycles, and I think it's the most important thing is being flexible.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. I definitely agree with that. No typical day. Okay, so we're going to switch directions a little bit and talk about lessons learned from leadership instead of just kind of overall philosophy. So if you could elaborate on a time when you were faced with failure, and what steps did you take to remedy this situation? And maybe even what did you learn from it?
Faced with, let me walk you through kind of one of the very first mistakes I've ever made.
Okay.
And this was in my internship, and this just really stands out to me. So I interned in the Office of Presidential Personnel for the White House, and that's where anybody that the president appoints comes through that office. So all of your secretaries, which is interesting, because there's a lot of prestige associated with that.
Sure.
So not only are we preparing the paperwork to ultimately make the recommendation that the president signs off on, but I was also supporting a director who works directly with those secretaries.
Oh, wow.
And so I will never forget that I got a call from a Secretary Elaine Chow at the time.
And still remember the name.
Yes, absolutely. She's still pretty prevalent on the political scene. And she made it very clear, this is Secretary Elaine Chow, and she needed to arrange a meeting with the director that I was supporting. And I was, of course, probably week 2 or 3 in my internship. And so I arranged for her to come to the Eisenhower Executive Office building, which is where the majority of the work is done and not the actual White House. And come to find out, that is not the cadence or the proper protocol of how you do that. Typically, your director will go to the secretary based off of just positions. And so when she came in, we're talking full security, and it was just a really it was a big to do, and you know, I thought, well, crap, I totally screwed that up. So number one, I was like, oh goodness, I just brought our secretary out to, you know, which could be a security issue at the end of the day.
Right.
It wasn't, and it turned out fine, and they gave me a lot of grace in the process. But I learned from that you have to ask a lot of questions and not make any assumptions.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I felt like an idiot, to be very honest with you. But man, it was a key learning for me of I've got to dig in. I've got to think a little bit higher and not just think tactically about what it is, what's the ask, why is the ask, you know, what's the proper process. And I learned a ton. I learned a ton from that. So not necessarily failure, but for me, I think a key learning very early in my career that I feel like has caused me to approach things differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what about in your formal leadership roles, what's been like that most significant lesson that you think you've learned, whether it's right when you started, now, still learning?
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing, if I reflect now, is you've got to have the right team.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's making sure that you as a leader, or I as a leader, am making those changes where needed. And making sure that I continue to raise the bar, continue to hold employees accountable, and do it in a fairly timely manner, right? I think talent makes all the difference.
Right.
And I can say now, you know, being on a team where I look around in team meetings, I get just really excited about the dynamics and just about the energy and about the talent that's in the room. And I think, man, if I just would have learned that lesson earlier, think how much further along the organization could be in certain areas. Yeah. So I think for me, that's been a huge learning.
Yep, that makes sense. Great to have a good team in place.
Yes.
Learn that one.
Yeah.
How have past leaders and mentors shaped your leadership style today?
Ooh, good question. When I was really early on in my career, like one of my first roles out of the gate, I had a really good male mentor. Who just took me under his wing, was able to, and he was like a senior executive in the same organization. And he was my go-to, right? Of, hey, what do you think about this? Or what could I have done differently here? Or what career advice do you have?
Sure.
And as I changed roles and moved around a lot within the organization, I continued to lean in. And I think that support was critical. I think when you're younger in your career, you're trying to figure out who you are, right? As a professional, right? You know who you are from a educational standpoint, but you try to kind of think through what that looks like in the professional world. And I think having a sounding board is so critical. I will say I still connect with one of my second or third leaders that I had within my first organization.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And lean into her and keep up and ask for support. And I just think that that's so important. I think the older you get, the more important you realize networking is, and making sure that you've got kind of that board of directors or trustees personally to be able to help to support you through that. And I think that everyone brings something unique to that, right? I think every mentor-mentee relationship is different. I think it's really defining, you know, what you need out of that, and making sure that you ask for help.
Yep, that makes sense. And then last question, what's the most rewarding aspect of your role as a leader?
My team. Yeah, I have to say my team. Yesterday we had a lunch, and I haven't laughed that hard in a really long time. And it was just so nice to be together with them again and again. I think it reiterates the fact that if you put in the work up front, you get to kind of reap some of those rewards. And so I just, at the end of the day, having the right team, and then also feeling like I'm making a difference. And so that's a little bit of it within this space. I feel like it is very value added, because I feel like we get to shape the future of the organization. And for me, that's what gets me excited at the end of the day. So I would say probably those two aspects.
Awesome. Well, that's all I got. Thanks for taking the time today.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.